very worthy and notable purpose. Every year, we feel compelled to remind our community of God's role in bringing about the life that we now enjoy physically, politically, socially, economically, in every way. And to remind you that God used a preacher to make a difference in the lives of all Americans, but in particularly the black community.
All right.
Every year I get the chance to say a little bit about Martin. I won't preach a sermon about him tonight. I'll do what I do every year.
Have your way.
From the thought of a legacy worth emulating. Psalms 103 reads, "Bless the Lord, O my soul,
All right.
and all that is within me. Bless his holy name."
Right.
Bless God, O my soul, and don't forget, or forget not all his benefits.
Yes, sir.
Today is a day of remembrance. This season of the year, this time of the year, we not only rather celebrate a birthday or call your attention to a holiday, but to a legacy worth remembering and emulating.
Yeah.
And while there are many who has been a part of helping catapult us to this point in our lives, to this quality of life, today calls our attention to a particular man that we can identify with and relate to through our vocation, our calling, our ethnicity, and our struggle. A man whose life was full of devotion to God.
All right.
And whose compassion and love for humanity was like none we have seen in this day and time.
All right.
We, the Central Mississippi Pastors Fellowship, deem his legacy worth remembering, worth celebrating, and worth emulating. As a matter of faith, we count him to be, as the psalmist said, one of God's benefits to us. He could have placed him anywhere in the world, but he sent him to us. And that man was Martin Luther King, Jr. Martin was born January 15, 1929. He was an American Baptist preacher pastor, an activist who became the visible spokesperson and leader in the civil rights movement from 1965 until his assassination in 1968 there in Memphis, Tennessee. And he's well known and best known for advancing civil rights through nonviolence. And the quality of life that we enjoy today here in America, to a very large degree, is part of the work that he and others devoted themselves to in our behalf. So today we remember him. we honor him and we celebrate him. While we must never forget the risk that he took, the sacrifices that he made, the life that he gave up, more significantly, we must let his life and his legacy inspire us and move us from memory to making a difference.
All right.
From marching up streets to marching for something and marching against something. His sermon, I Have a Dream, some call it a speech. But because Martin was a preacher, I call it a sermon.
All right.
August 28, 1963, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, ranks among the most famous sermon in history.
Right.
And at the advice of some of his advisors, Martin almost didn't deliver that sermon. But an old gospel singer was there named Mahalia Jackson. And Mahalia said to him, tell him about your dream, young man.
All right.
Martin parted from his prescriptive text and began to allude to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address by saying 50 years ago, and the Emancipation Proclamation which had gone into effect at that time. Martin noted that after 100 years, he said, the Negro still not free. The rights promised in the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution was still denied. As he began to close his sermon, I Have a Dream,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
he soared to the end with repeated frames, let freedom ring. He calls on the 19th century patriotic song written by Samuel Francis Smith. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride.
Yeah.
From every mountainside, let freedom ring. His sermon was so powerful that one of the directors of FBI, William Sullivan, wrote that he must be marked as the most dangerous Negro to the future of America. It's a good reminder of how powerful our preaching can be.
That's right.
They wiretapped his phones, wiretapped his offices, wiretapped his organizations, set up cameras to monitor his personal behavior. But his work and his preaching spoke louder than anything they did to him.
All right.
His preaching was so powerful that it compelled Lyndon B. Johnson to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
All right.
But how can we really honor him? How can we really celebrate him? What are the things that would honor Martin and emulate his legacy and inspire us today? One was his powerful preaching. It was his preaching of God's love, justice, and righteousness for all mankind that inspired hope courage, and uniformity of action. Brothers, we must preach. It wasn't preaching about tipping and dipping. Wasn't that kind of preaching. Wasn't preaching about where you were last night.
Come on, Dan.
Instead, it was preaching that fed hungry souls and addressed the needs that people were experiencing in that day and time. It was his preaching that made a difference. If we're going to emulate him, honor him, and celebrate him, we must make preaching a priority. Preaching that feeds hungry souls. Preaching that lift up bowed down heads.
Come on now.
Preaching that give confidence to those who are doubting.
Yes, sir.
Preaching that serves as a light in a dark place.
Come on,
we must preach if we're going to honor him. It's important that we preach the good news of the gospel and that our community hear from those of us who have been called to this great work. Paul said, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation for everyone that believeth.
Yes, sir.
So if we are to honor him, if we are to celebrate him, and emulate him in a way that makes a difference in our communities, and keep his dream alive, we must preach, and our community must hear. They must value the preaching of the gospel. Secondly, we must emulate his courage. Martin was not a scary man. I heard him say that a lot of times that he was nervous, but he was never scared.
All right.
We must emulate his courage. As gospel preachers, we must not be afraid.
Yeah, yeah.
We must imitate his physical courage. He was brave in the face of physical harm. His advisors and many others had suggested, and his enemies had warned him not to go to Memphis, Tennessee. But Martin was full of courage. Joshua was told to be very courageous. That the only way for Israel to win,
That's what it said.
was for Joshua to be courageous. Very courageous. The only way to make their enemies ineffective, was for Joshua to be very courageous.
Yes, sir.
As leaders in the community, called by God, if we are to honor Martin and emulate him in a way that makes a difference in this day and time, we too must be full of physical courage.
Yes, sir.
We must emulate his social courage in the face of embarrassing situations. In the face of exclusion and being shut out.
Yes, sir.
In the face of rejection, being unpopular.
Yes, sir.
Martin was full of courage. He believed in his dream. Put him in jail. Many of his preacher friends did not stand by his side. Wrote a powerful letter from the Birmingham jail addressing some of those doubts. We must be more concerned about the mission to which God has called us than the embarrassment we face, the exclusion we face, and the unpopular rejection we face. We must emulate his social courage. We must emulate his intellectual courage. He was full of courage. That is, he was willing to engage with challenging ideas and question his own thinking and the thinking of others.
All right.
He was not afraid of a degree hanging on the wall that was not his. He was not afraid of a mayor or a governor.
All right.
He had intellectual courage that came from God.
Yes, sir.
We too must emulate his intellectual courage.
All right.
We may not have a degree from Harvard or Yale.
All right.
May not have a degree from Mississippi State or Valley State.
Yeah.
But he had God on his side. We too must emulate that kind of godly courage
Yes, sir.
for the good of others. We must emulate his moral courage. If we are to honor him and celebrate him and make a difference in this day and time, we must emulate his moral courage. Moral courage is doing the right thing in the face of opposition.
All right.
Matching our words and actions with our ideals and our values. Not about what we claim to be, but who we reveal ourselves to be in the face of difficulty and in the face of trying times. Martin said that the true measure of a man is not what he is in moments of comfort and convenience, but who he is in the face of challenges and difficulty.
All right.
We must emulate his emotional courage.
Right.
Being able to stay positive on the difficult, on the trying, on the negative and hard circumstances.
Yes, yes.
Being able to stay positive when we're talked about.
Yes, sir. Right.
Being able to stay positive when we have to go all by ourselves. We must emulate his emotional courage, and we must emulate his spiritual courage. The ability to trust in God, even when we can't see what the whole staircase looks like.
All right, Daniel. All right.
We must emulate his spiritual courage. Finally, we must emulate his dream. His dream was not simply REM sleep. It was a reality.
Yeah.
His dream was not a wish that was beyond his reach.
Right.
If we march to the courthouse, march with a dream, not just a memory. If we have a men's day, have a men's day with a dream, not just a memory.
All right.
If we have a women's day in our churches, have a women's day with a dream, being inspired to make a difference. We too must make our dreams a reality. Martin was devoted to the black church institutionally and to God theologically. We must uphold the black church. We must not flock to places that do not identify and relate to our struggle. We must keep our black church strong, for it too has been a lamp unto our feet. It's been a light to our path. It's been the bat and the base for our betterment. It's been our shelter in the time of storm and from the storm.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And if we are to emulate and honor Martin, these are some things that we too must do. God bless you, and thank God God for Martin Luther King Jr.